Alrighty, folks. So we're over the midweek hump, and global markets are really enjoying a positive move to the upside recently. And US markets are increasingly ever expecting a rate cut come in September. And that expectation really is gaining more weight. Obviously, you've got the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, suggesting of a 50 basis point cut coming in September. And if such a move is coming, it would need to be framed really as a normalization rather than a recessionary response. If you take a look back there at historical normalization cuts, it does tend to spark a rally within the markets, whereas with recessionary cuts, it tends to spook the markets out. So we could start to see, if we do get a cut in September, we really could start to see a further extension out of the overall cycle, including the crypto market. So it will be pretty interesting to see how that plays out and how the market prices it in over the next couple of months. But we'll jump over to oil. And yesterday the bulls were nowhere to be found. So we did mention there that 63.47 was the local level that price would need to gain above if it wanted any chance of getting to the top side. Didn't make anywhere near the 63.47 level, and we sold off then into the 0.75 of the range, which we have been watching now for the last few days during this week. So yeah, obviously today it's pretty clear locally where we closed the day off and opened it up at 62.65. That's the level that oil would need to remain above. Really, it could afford a wick into the 0.75, but if you want to paint a bullish picture, you would want to see that hold this level here and actually start moving up towards the R1 if you wanted the positive move on it. And you can see there at that level, would expect to see a bit of a resistance, obviously, just with all of the supply that we have in that level. And then if we take a look here at gold, so yesterday the key level that we wanted to see price hold above overnight was 33.46, and we done so with a pretty good back test going into what would be the UK global or the UK trading market open times, and we pushed on up as high really as 33.70 before selling off and closing the day off again there at 33.56. So kind of similar to oil there in terms of how local and how close to current price action today's level is. So 33.56, that's where you want to remain above, and then revisit yesterday's high at 33.70. If we do find a bit of resistance here overnight at the supply zone, then you don't really want to see anything close below this demand. Come in, pick up the demand zone, and push it back on up towards the 33.70. If you do start closing below this level, you are looking at a low time frame structure break. And you don't want that. You don't want that to be happening, especially when we're squeezing on the high time frame for gold. And sector-wise, yesterday the materials sector was by far the standout performer, just under a 2% gain on the day, and that's supported by strength within metals and mining. So as the industrial metal prices are getting a lift from improved global growth, the overall softer dollar outlook as well, the sector itself is seeing a pretty decent bump in recent days there. So you can see really from Tuesday how much of a run materials have been on. So pretty good there, and overall there was no real losses on the sectors today. You did have the likes of tech and consumer staples there just holding out just above a 0% move for the day, but all in all, pretty positive day across the board. And then the S&P 500. So here we can see the S&P 500. Yesterday we really ramped up in this curved move and then popped going into what was kind of similar to what we saw on golds. It popped going into the UK trading session opening, and then we rallied on up towards the R1 target there of 64.72. So once the full US market was open, it did sell off during the day, only kind of reversing once it came down into the demand zone. So again, we're very close. Price action itself is trading very close to today's daily level. So hold the daily pivot, and I would expect to see us push through the supply up into 64.81 and then on to 6,500. If we do have any shocks come into the market and we do feel any levels above here, then you don't want any closures below 64.39. Once you start closing below that, then you're really starting to look like you're going to drive deeper and deeper. And ideally, you want to see levels continue to be gained here over the next week or two, just to really squeeze out any remaining momentum that's in the market, trying to price in these potential rate cuts. The Nasdaq fairly similar yesterday, continued its ramp up and then pushed all the way up into the R1 there at 23. What is that? 23,963. So rejected off that going into the full market open and then just stalled out after selling off. So that's our daily pivot today, 23,861. Need to regain that to push for yesterday's high up into the supply. And if we feel the daily pivot, then yeah, I would say it's 23,755. And if we lose that level, then it's back towards the weekly open. I would expect come down into this demand zone and eat it up for a little bit. So you do have the opportunity for support around the weekly open again for the Nasdaq, but ideally what you see here overnight is a gain of the daily level. And then finally, we have the Dow Jones. So here we can see the Dow Jones had an absolute monster of a push up. So yes, kind of sideways early on overnight, but pushed all the way up into the R2 there at 44,884. So really good gains there for the Dow Jones. Obviously, it was one of the indices that didn't quite get its all-time high. But we are very darn close to that happening now. So continue to watch for the Dow Jones here. Any retracement overnight, you would want to see it come into the demand and not lose it. So that's 44,784. And yeah, if we pop December, it will be 45,100 or 45,142 for the Dow Jones. But overall, folks, levels are looking good across markets. Even in the crypto market, we're seeing some really positive returns recently. So we'll see how everything gets on here, and yeah, hope everyone has a good rest of their week.